All right, so I promised some kind of recording on a few of the acts here, Act 3 and Act 4, and today I'll be talking about Act 3 of King Lear, which is an extremely difficult portion of the text to speak about because everyone's raving crazy, raving mad. And the storm is taking place. So it's this famous moment in King Lear where there's a storm that clearly reflects the interior disposition. That's obviously an invitation for us to see things symbolically, but that also makes things difficult to see things symbolically if we can't look at it for the people themselves uh, and understand them as people. We might too easily dismiss this moment as merely a symbolic display. So one of the things I like to do is look at King Lear still as a person. And we've talked about him as someone who is uh, Lear and the 100 Knights is stuck in the collective. We've discussed this going all the way back to the beginning of the school year. We talked about the problem of the individual and the collective, how the collective forces, exerts, asserts, perhaps sometimes aggressively demands conformity for the individual. The individual must change in order to satisfy the desires of the collective, which are sometimes impossible to even know. And so imagine then King Lear is someone who has conformed to that collective. He's consumed by it. It's now Lear and the 100 Knights. And so that's his sense of retirement is to be completely his body, his soul, his existence to be one with the collective and to escape the resistance of the individual against the collective, to escape that problem. It's very un-American in many ways, but it's also very American in many ways, that certainly socially, right? It's American in an idea, but in reality, this is kind of the American manager, the one who has successfully managed a collective, a business, or any group of individuals who's successfully managed them has had to relinquish his individual will in order to support the collective. And as long as he relinquishes his individual will, the collective rewards him for it. And so in a way, the retirement, Lear and his 100 Knights, is an image of Lear having no soul, having relinquished it. Right? And so his daughters demanding that collective be stripped from him is both an act of violence and the very thing that he needs done to become a real person. So we get a sense of who Lear is. He's someone who has to reclaim some sense of the soul of being human. It's easy enough to say he has to reclaim some sense of himself. But that means nothing if you're not even human, right? That's reclaiming some sense of yourself is like that's the long game. That's way off in the distance. First, you have to reclaim your humanity against the world. And so his daughters cut that from him, and now he has nothing. And he curses his daughters for this because he's now been stripped of everything. And so he goes mad. And we talked about that problem when the collective sees, in fact, they don't really have any real authority in the world except for some authority they've granted themselves. That impotence can cause them either to smile and accept it, to rage against it, or to injure themselves and go mad. And so he has no other option, seemingly, than to go mad. And so the storm is an image of that. And we see the storm is also an image of what the captain has to encounter on the open sea. So it brings us to other famous images, other famous tropes. This moment with King Lear and the Storm is is a true tempest. Everything appears during this time. You could trace out all of Shakespeare's plays. They have some moment, some reference in everything that's said throughout. You could probably trace out the history of religion, the history of England. You could trace out the tradition. You could probably find a reference to every single great work. It is this coalescence of everything all at once. And so in some ways it's this crazy mix, this crazy mashup. And in other ways, it's that human attempt to understand the divine, which, because we can only understand things from time to time, if we tried to understand God, it appears as madness to us. So there's something divine in this moment as well. This mix up, this mashup becomes something, an expression of the impossibility of man to actually control anything except for to hand himself over, not to the collective, but to the original source. And so the madness of it we experience. So King Lear is like a captain on a ship. And really there's two figures on a ship. You have uh, the captain who charts the new course, and the first mate, or sometimes the bosun, who manages the ship, all hands on deck, who gets everything together and makes sure that the ship itself is in proper order so that it can continue sailing. But it's the captain who's supposed to chart the new course, who's supposed to know where things are going. And in this sense, we get a sort of model of the two different types of leaders. The captain is a visionary who can see things that others can't, who can take the boat to a location, to a destination, and ultimately its destiny that no one else could do. And so that position is reserved for the visionary, the one who can see something new. Whereas the first mate is one who is meant to manage. In the absence of the captain, the first mate is supposed to manage the boat according to the vision of the captain. If the captain does not have if the captain does not have his first mate, then he must relegate his vision and become the first mate. And so anyway, in those senses, as you look at King Lear, who has he been? Has he been a visionary, or has he been a manager? And I've already discussed a little bit that sort of American sense. The manager is the one who sort of has to hand over himself to the collective. That's not the case for the visionary. It's not the case for the captain. He's the figure that demands the collective conform itself to his vision, because the destiny is a shared destiny. And if he's the one who has the vision for the destiny, then the collective should conform itself to that in order to achieve something greater than itself. He's the one who sees the thing that's greater than itself. So, looking at King Lear, which one is he? Is he the visionary, or is he the manager? And not to say that the first mate of the manager is bad. He does not have himself the vision, but can be an inheritor. He can inherit the vision and then lead, consequently, help lead the collective to that destiny. But essentially, I mean, my argument would be that the Pope himself is the manager par excellence. The papacy is managerial, and you're the first mate. The Pope is supposed to be the first mate, not supposed to be a visionary, taking the church to some new destiny that's unforeseen. Really, the Pope is supposed to be a manager. The vision's been given to him, and he is supposed to attend to the needs of the collective in order to get us to that destiny that the captain originally saw. And so the Pope is meant to be a sort of manager, but in that way he has the most authority. So So in a sense, the managerial leader is not a diminishment, but it's a great honor. It's a great honor to follow that kind of vision. But if the managerial leader has been given no vision, or if he thinks he's a visionary, then everything falls apart. Everything falls apart. And so the great act of leading is always under fire. It's always set before the court, and the judge has to decide whether actions have been appropriate towards that end or inappropriate towards that end. So we look at King Lear, and the major question is, has he been a visionary? Has he taken Albion? Has he taken England to a new vision? Has he allowed himself to see a new vision? Or has he been managing it towards his own ends? I think there's some evidence here in this part that can give us a kind of response to that question. I'm not ready to answer it just yet, but I'd like you to think about it. And that'll be the end of the podcast for now. Look at Act 3 and see, at least in that sense, watch the character of King Lear and see if there's any suggestion that there's, number one, a change in him, but if there is or is not, who is he? Has he been a visionary? Has he been a manager? Has he been a good visionary? Has he been a good manager? Or has he failed? And maybe he would know it at this point, in this madness, in this storm, where the divine comes in and stirs things up. Okay, well, thank you for listening. I'm sorry if I took too long, but hopefully you enjoy that. And then next podcast will be about Act 4, and I may rediscuss portions of this the storm, just to sort of recapitulate that. Okay? All right, I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.